Earl D. Mix was the mayor of Deer Park from 1935 until 1960. In 1965, Mayor James Swinyard honored Mix by naming a park after him. Most area residents are familiar with Mix Park on the west side of Deer Park. The park has and continues to host weddings, receptions, family reunions, Easter egg hunts, church services, and on the fourth Saturday of July, Settlers Picnic. What folks might not be aware of are the origins of the park. In 1917, W.H. Short, one of the founding fathers of Deer Park, offered the property as a sort of a campground for travelers. But World War I and the flu pandemic stopped progress on the idea until 1921, when a group of volunteers began the task of clearing brush and building a park. In 1924, the second Settlers Picnic, the first being held on the Losh Farm in Wild Rose, was held at the new tourist park. But it wasn't until August of 1926 that the property was purchased by the city under Mayor George Walter. For a good history of Mix Park and its origins as tourist park, check out the Clayton Deer Park Historical Society's January 2016 mortarboard written by editor Wally Lee Parker. But our story today jumps ahead to 2001, when Mayor Mike Wolfe had the opportunity to double the size of the 5-acre park. I was able to sit down with former Mayor Wolfe and also with real estate agent James Palmer Sr., founder of Real Estate Marketplace, who we will see played an important role in our story. I asked Mike to tell how the acquisition of the adjacent Pines Motel and Trailer Park came about.
Yes, it came to my attention through Marilyn Stern, who was the owner at that time. Her husband Ed had passed away. My wife and I were personal friends with Ed and Marilyn, thank you. See, that's how close a friendship we had. And she came to City Hall one day, unannounced, and asked if we would be, told me that the Pines Motel was for sale, and wanted to know if the city would like to buy it. She indicated she would like the city to buy it as an addition to the park specifically, and change the motif that it had been encumbered with for years. And I didn't know at the time that it had been for sale or that it was for sale. I was certainly interested. Took the issue to the city council, who discussed it negatively. As a whole body, they were against it. But authorized me to visit with Marilyn's attorney, which I did, and who again was a personal friend from high school, which was lucky enough. Took the information back to the city council, who more or less resigned to the fact that we should have it, but didn't want the financial burden of it at the time because we couldn't afford it, which was true. It was a burden on the city at the time. They authorized for conversation only $175,000 to purchase the property, and at that time it was being offered at a lot more money than that. So I made an appointment, went in to visit with her attorney, with Jay Violet, and the amount of money that the council had authorized was not enough. And he was very verbally insistent that it wasn't enough, and called Marilyn on the phone and told her that it wasn't enough. And she told him in no uncertain terms that the city needed to buy that piece of property, that there were other people involved and other people interested in the property, but she wanted the city to have it.
So, with the final vote of 3-2, Mayor Wolfe had the votes he needed to purchase the property. The two dissenting council members, were concerned with the financial wisdom of obligating the city to what was, at the time, a big expenditure. The next issue Mayor Wolfe had to deal with was that the purchase included not only the 5+ acres of land, but also cabins, cute in the 60s, but now pretty much dilapidated. Also, there were well over a dozen trailers, privately owned, but renting spaces.
But also during that time, the park had numerous trailers and rentals. Some were, they were all privately owned trailers, and they needed to be moved. There were issues involved in Spokane at that time at 2 different mobile home courts where the people were being evicted and suing the city and the county over the eviction and the owners, because the owners wanted to change the use of the property from mobile home parks to commercial or other residential uses. The only feasible recommendation that I had was Mr. Palmer and his associates, because of the experience that they had and the quality of business that they ran. The city council approved Mr. Palmer and associates to be the managers of this property, keeping the city at arm's length and being the on-site and contact person for the city. And the idea was to make the moving as easy for the inhabitants as possible.
Well, I would like to say first that it was Jim Palmer Sr. and Jim Palmer Jr. and my wife and his wife. We were full partners in that adventure. And I remember the night that we went to the city council to make our pitch so that we could get that contract. And the only thing I really remember is that Don Stevens was on the council then, and he asked, well, Jim, he said, my son and I were both there. Jim and Jim were there. He said, how do we know that you're going to do what you say you'll do? And he kind of stumped me. I said, well, I don't know what to tell you, Don, except that we do what we say we'll do. He said, that's good enough for me. So it went from there. So there were a lot of things we had to deal with that were very difficult. The sewer and the electricity and the water lines were all in disrepair, and we had all kinds of problems that way. And most all the trailers were just really junk. They were just old. They were probably old when they were moved in there. And I don't know how long they were. I don't know really how long they were there, but and some of the tenants had been there for quite a few years. And when we first announced, and I gave them notice that it was going to be closed down in a year, and they would have to start looking for a place. And we tried hard to help them to find a place. And but there was quite a bit of opposition then. A lot of them didn't like that very well. They didn't like the idea of moving. They said they'd been there for years and so forth. Yeah.
One thing I can say about the tenants, I never did get a bad report on Jim's conduct or what he was doing on any of them. Everybody that talked to me were very, very happy with the treatment and the solutions that were offered. Now, it could be that those that were unhappy never did come to me, which is normal too. They might have been talking to Jim, but the contacts I had were all positive.
Well, they weren't all happy, and we had, a few that were pretty hard to convince that they were going to have to go. And in fact, as I remember, a few we actually had to threaten, legal process, but they finally.
And the letter and information that they were given they were assured that legal action would be taken and followed through. It wasn't going to be left to fall to the side. It was going to happen. And there's some that never did pay rent.
Yeah.
You know, they were there until they left and decided since they had to move, they weren't going to.
Yeah, that's the case. Yeah. I remember one lady that's right on whatever the street is. Right, her trailer was right almost on the city street. She was, I think, one of the last ones to go. And I don't know that she ever did pay any rent after we took it over. But, it was pretty hard for us, really. I would say, though, probably we were just getting started in our business. You know, we'd been just 2 years, and, you know, it was on a prayer and a shoestring, actually. And if not for my wife and Jim Jr.'s wife, the 25th of the month, until about the 10th of the month, they were in our office probably 9, 10 o'clock at night doing those books. And that park was doing the books for that was an absolute nightmare. And I think we negotiated with the city 10% of the gross rents, and there was a lot of them that didn't pay rent, you know. So we didn't get rich on the deal, but I think we're still in business now, probably because we had that to start with. It gave us a boost. Yeah. I always thought that Mike needed big time kudos, but that's nothing he ever wanted. That says a lot for Mike Wolfe. But without the foresight that Mike had and the courage to push it through the council, follow through, that this beautiful park wouldn't be there today, really. We had a part in it, right, but we got paid for our part, and Mike just was the mayor, and I'm sure he took a lot of flack over that park, you know. But it was a good thing for us because we were just starting in business, and it's probably why we're still in business, because we made it in the first 2 or 3 years. We probably might not have without the income from that park, even though it was, you know, a lot of them didn't ever pay rent. But still, you know, we muddled through, and in the end we got them all moved, and I think without a lot of hard feelings toward the city in the end.
Very true. You did an excellent job. And I was lucky enough to be a friend of the lady who was Marilyn and Ed. They wanted, their family didn't necessarily want the city to have it because it wasn't getting as much money as what they had expected out of it, and not even what it was appraised at. But Marilyn, and Ed was gone by that time, but Marilyn wanted it to go to the city. So, you know, and we can pat each other on the back all we want. If it wasn't for Marilyn and if it wasn't for you, it wouldn't have happened. Because I was not going to put the city in a position to be the facilitator of that move. It would not have been legally appropriate.
Well, we understood that too, and I think that's the reason we didn't. I don't remember ever consulting with you about anything.
Nope.
During that course of time, and in the end, there were a couple of the trailers that there were no titles. We had no way of identifying the ownership, and it required a permit to move them. When without ownership proof, you couldn't get a permit. So there was a fellow there that we just told him, if they're gone in the morning, you own them. And they somehow magically disappeared that night. So
And I don't think that after all you went through to get it and all the opposition that you had, that anybody can go look today and say it was a big mistake.
No, no. Every year at Settlers, people congratulate me for what happened. And I tell every one of them that these are the folks that made it happen, not me. And I made that announcement last year at Settlers when I had the mic in my hand. And asking for people who know the Stearns to have them come forward so they can be acknowledged. You know, there are a lot of players in this. It's not just me. I just happen to be the pivot guy.
Well, you two can duke it out about who was more responsible, but without either one of you, I don't think it would have happened.
That's probably true.
Okay.
Jay McIsaac's admirable concern about city finances led him to vote against the purchase in 2001. I spoke to him for this story, and he said, "What a different time. In hindsight, the purchase was a great addition, and the park is a fantastic asset to Deer Park."